A system of incremental and progressive improvements. It sounds like going to the gym, but it's actually Medallion architecture, which is what we're going to be digging into today on the Data Radio Show. Hello there, welcome to this week's Data Radio Show episode. Now, before we start, don't forget, hit that like, subscribe, share button, tell everybody about what's going on, and hopefully you learn something informative from this. In this week's episode, Sam's going to be sitting down and having a chat to Patrick O'Halloran, who works for Wherescape, which is a large automation company. And they're going to be talking in particular around Medallion architecture, which is a way to logically organize data in a lakehouse. And it works through incremental improvements, going through raw integration, filtered, cleaned, augmented information, and then business level aggregates in what they call bronze, silver, and gold levels. But I'm going to leave it to the experts to discuss this one because, well, they're the experts. So let's jump over to that conversation with Sam and Patrick.
Hello, listeners and viewers. Today I'm joined by Patrick O'Halloran. He's from Wherescape, and he's going to be talking to us a little bit about the evolution of Medallion architecture and how Wherescape and the automation platform from Wherescape helps data engineers effectively navigate the world of Databricks and how to use Medallion architecture. Hello. I'm tempted to say good morning, but I keep remembering that
I don't know what time it is.
There we go. How are you doing today, Patrick?
Doing quite well. It's a nice cool day. Our heat wave's finally over, so I'm tempted to open the doors and just enjoy the nice weather outside.
Excellent. Yes, I heard this morning that it's unseasonably warm for Halloween in the States. I guess, Patrick, where I wanted to start was picking up on a newsletter that we published recently about Medallion architecture. For those listeners and viewers that are new to Medallion architecture, can you give us an idea of what it is and why it's useful?
Sure. So it's more of they call it an architecture, but really it's a methodology. It's a way you process data. So data warehouses, and I do a lot of talks about this, and I always preface it by saying data warehouse is sort of, I don't want to say an archaic term, but a dated term. So whether there's a data lake house, data warehouse, data mart, data whatever, I just call it a data foundation, your large historical curated data set that you're using. They've really changed a lot in the last 10 years. And 10 years ago, I'm sure they changed a lot from the 10 years before that. But there's more data, more sources, and more emphasis on the business analysts and data scientists. And especially now, you can't go through a webinar without saying AI, without AI using that data as well. So if you're merging Excel spreadsheets, a couple of Excel spreadsheets, if you're pulling data from one or two, maybe SQL Server databases that are on-prem, it's pretty easy to get curated data into some format that people can see and people can use. But with this growth of not just data, but data sources, there needs to be some sort of process for getting data from raw data to useful information. And the Medallion architecture, in one way, shape, or form, has always been around. Databricks has named it and has given labels to these things. But basically, there's an ingestion layer, there is a curation layer, and there's a presentation layer, which Databricks calls bronze, silver, and gold. And the idea of the bronze level, the ingestion, is you bring in data from all of your data sources, so databases, JSON files, REST APIs, Excel spreadsheets, files, pictures, whatever it is, with as minimal change as possible. And that allows a few different things. Primarily allows auditability. I can go back and look at my raw data coming from my source systems. Maybe my source system purges data every 90 days, and I want to see what did I load 6 months ago. That's kind of the purpose of the bronze layer. Bring in raw data, process it as little as possible, no data quality checks, very little manipulation. You always want to be able to recreate what you had. The next layer is the silver layer, where you're starting to do processing and curation. You're denormalizing, you're merging data from multiple sources. If you're familiar with data mesh as I don't want to call it a methodology, a philosophy, I guess, where you're creating data products. You're not just creating a data warehouse, but you're creating products for a customer, or data about a student, or data about a product, whatever it is. That's kind of where the silver layer is. You've merged data from multiple sources, you've curated it, you've done quality checks, and then the third layer, the gold layer, is called the semantic layer, or the presentation layer. The gold layer, that's where you get data in a format that can be useful to the analysts, people who are using Tableau, Power BI, Looker, Yellowfin, whatever it is, to do their analysis and answer business results. So those three functions, ingestion, curation, and presentation, have always been there in one way, shape, or form. It's just that Databricks has called them bronze, silver, and gold, and then built the Databricks tool set around that to help build those three things.
And I guess for those also not familiar with what Wherescape offers in this space, maybe join the dots between that approach and how an automation platform like Wherescape helps.
Sure. It used to be simple. We used to describe ourselves as data warehouse automation. But again, the term data warehouse has been overcome by other terms. So we generally say data automation now. But we started as a consulting company in New Zealand about 22 years ago, building data warehouses, traditional data warehouses. And after building several of them, started building some tools to accelerate that development. And those tools became very powerful. A couple of the customers asked if they could buy those tools. And at that point, Wherescape stopped as a consulting company and began as a software company. So in just a few words, what Wherescape does is we automate the design, the development, the deployment, operation of that entire data foundation. What would be the ingestion, the curation, and the presentation in such a way that makes things very repeatable, very adaptable, and probably the biggest thing is productivity gains, both in terms of development of that initial pipeline of data, going from raw sources to actionable information, but also the maintenance on it as well. If I'm generating code and generating potentially hundreds of thousands of lines of Python code, tens of thousands of lines of DDL and BML and things like that, if I can generate those, I can be pretty sure they're going to work the first time. And we've got use cases of customers who are skipping steps. The QA team is skipping steps because of the automated process in which we generate objects. Quick example: we had a customer that was developing a data warehouse that had something like 300 or 400 objects in it. The QA team said that we don't need to do unit testing on these objects. As long as they're generated by Wherescape, we can skip straight into integration testing. So we trust it's going to do what we told it to do. Now the question is, did we tell it to do the right thing? So the integration testing is it doing what we told it to do? They just blankly, the QA team, whose purpose is to test things, specifically said, we don't need to test these. So that's another huge advantage of Wherescape's tools. In addition to the design, profiling of source systems, I could talk for the entire hour about this.
Well, I guess you used the Q word there, quality. So I guess this is one of the interesting aspects of how the Medallion architecture is kind of conceived, is managing and improving data quality. Do you want to just talk to listeners a little bit about that?
Sure. So the ingestion phase, the bronze layer of the Medallion architecture is, I don't want to call it straightforward, but it's easy to verify that you're doing it correctly. Did I ingest the right number of rows? Can I recreate what I ingested? So that's a fairly testable, quantifiable, provable step that you can do independently of everything else. The next layer, that curation phase, getting into the silver layer, again, you're adding data quality checks there. You may not be at a point where end users can actually use the data because maybe it's in some strange format. Maybe it's not quite denormalized. Maybe there's calculated fields or other things that need to be added, rankings, other things. But that's where the data quality comes in. And the nice thing about having that bronze layer there is if you do discover that you've been doing things entirely wrong and your data quality checks are horrible, you can potentially go back to your bronze layer and recreate all your data, run through all your quality checks again. And the advantage of a tool like Wherescape is because you're building, I don't know, let's say 50, 60, 100, 200 tables. They're going to hold that curated data. The quality checks and things are built into the automated process. How do I verify that strings are a certain length, that they're not being truncated? How do I verify that the number of rows I've got matches what my source system is? And all those kinds of quality checks can be built into the automated process as well. So the combination of Databricks silver layer in the Medallion architecture of having curated data, being able to derive that data from the bronze layer repeatedly, and the automatedness, the automatability, the automation provided by Wherescape. It says that you can take a lot of manual steps and get your data quality in a much better place. And if it's not, you can redo those steps.
Right. I guess part of what prompted us to be having this conversation is the interest level, if you like, around data quality and how you make incrementally, or how you take incremental steps to improve data quality and manage data quality. And this is something that I understand that Wherescape has quite a number of useful tools or mechanisms, if you like, to help with. Could you just give us a high level point of view?
Sure. I'd say a year and a half ago, people talked about data governance and access and control. But since, again, to mention the phrase AI, since that's really come to the forefront in the last year and a half, data quality is the number one thing. You feed in bad data, you get bad results. So again, that idea of automation, if I've got character strings I need to check, I can do profiling through Wherescape of my source systems. So I can get reports on null percentages, min values, max values, whatever metrics I want. I can add my own custom metrics as a profile in my source system. Again, whether that's an ODBC connection, a JSON file, Excel spreadsheet, whatever it is. That allows me as either an architect or an engineer to look at the source system and say, is the data here problematic? Is referential integrity a problem? Do I have parent-child relationships in my source system where you've got orphaned records? Those kinds of checks I can put in early on, if not before the ingestion phase. Actually, I could do it before the ingestion phase, even before I design that part. Just run the quality checks on the source system, again, with the out-of-the-box metrics or the custom metrics I can write. And then I can go back to the source system and say, source system owners, and ask them, why is the data so bad? And they may or may not have an answer, but at least I'll know that some data I can trust more than other data.
I suppose, would you say that is quite relevant when it comes to training data for AI models or LLMs?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, even if you're not even just training a machine, even if you're just feeding data into an AI engine to generate something, do predictive analysis, whatever it is. If I give it, I don't know, 10, 20, 50 terabytes of data or 100 gigabytes, however much it is, and 10% of that is crap, I'm going to get bad results. The thing about these deterministic solutions or tools is that you don't know exactly what they're doing. An example I use is a long time, ever this 10 plus years ago, someone was trying to train an AI machine to recognize pictures of happy people from pictures of sad people. And they put tens of thousands of pictures through this engine,
Yeah.
trying to train it to tell what's happy and what's sad. And on their data sets, it was very, very successful and worked very well. As soon as they started introducing other data sets, they realized what they trained it to do was to tell pictures of people who are indoors versus people who are outdoors. People who are outdoors tended to look happier than people who were indoors. So that's a bias of data selection, more so than data quality. But data quality can lead to just as bad results. If you've got summation fields that don't match the sum of all the individual things it's adding up together, that's just going to confuse your AI engine you're trying to train. And as I said, since it's non-deterministic, you don't know what it's going to learn and what rules it's going to derive.
Yeah, I suppose from a governance standpoint, this concept of shall we say rubbish in and rubbish out, is particularly relevant when it comes to inference. And I guess an example that I'm familiar with, and it's not exactly in the space, but the unconscious bias that there lies in data sets is probably the hardest thing to weed out, and it's quite difficult to do up front for the reasons that you were describing, that you don't know how the data is going to be used. The example that I can think of is the Shirley card. I don't know whether you're familiar with the mistyping of images. So the Shirley card was something that Kodak used to get color balance right in film developing days.
Okay.
The challenge with the Shirley card is that the color balance was all skewed towards Europeans or Caucasian people. So what they saw over time was the mistyping of, so old images were of people of color were not correctly color balanced. They were actually skewed more towards Caucasians. And so, there's this famous story of Google mistyping images of people of color as baboons and gorillas. And they've still not actually solved this problem, just by the way, as best I can tell. They've just switched off the capability to do it. And it all can be traced back to the color balancing in film photography, that just the algorithms couldn't tell the difference between a black person and an animal with fur that was black as well. And I guess it's a really interesting example of unconscious bias in data sets that no data quality check is necessarily going to pick up on it. It's only once you've actually been through the entire process of ingesting things and get the wrong results, by which time you've spent a ton of money only to discover that you've got something that's going to generate fundamentally wrong results. I don't know whether you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's true. I heard a story about a company that was feeding feeding data into an AI to train it to scan resumes, and they fed it the resume of all their current employees, and who were predominantly white and had names of a certain structure and ages and educations of a certain structure. And when the AI machine started rejecting resumes out of hand before a person could look at it, they realized they were selecting people who were very, very similar to the people they already had. So that's that bias. It's, I suppose, again, going back to the difference between QA and QC. Are we doing things the right way, and are we doing the right thing? Wherescape can certainly help with are we doing things the right way? In that the data coming in, we can validate it, help validate it. We can do quality checks, things like that. Now, is that the right data set to bring in? I can't. I suppose someone smarter than me could probably figure out a way to automate that. But right now, if you give me a data set, I don't know what data is missing. I don't know if there's inherent bias in that. So I'm not sure, other than through some external validation, maybe I could do sampling and look through the results. But we're going to help with the. Are we doing? Is the data curated in the sense that it's passed all the rules we set in place? Now, the next question is, did we put the right rules in place, or did we get the right data to begin with? That's kind of out of the scope of what Wherescape does. I'm not sure exactly where that would fit and who would identify that kind of issue, other than people just being aware of it.
I suppose it's a question of your governance, your policy side of things, essentially the ethics of what it is that you're doing. And I guess that's a dimension that data engineers need to take into account.
Yeah, I guess you could test it in the sense that you could feed it let's say you're selecting resumes. You could feed it a large set of resumes before that, saying here's the results we expect to get. Feed it a large set of resumes, see what's coming out, and then hope that your internal bias doesn't reconfirm the biases that AI had learned.
Yes, exactly. I guess to sum up, what would you, if you're talking to someone about the advantages of Wherescape and its automation and its ability to help you manage data quality using the Medallion architecture, what would be your kind of elevator pitch? That short sentence that's, what makes you unique?
So a couple things. One is, as I said before, profiling the source systems. That's something I haven't seen in any cloud-based architecture, whether it's Databricks or Snowflake or things like that. The idea that you can add your own metrics to this profiling. So as I said before, number of rows, min values, max values, average string length, those kinds of things are pretty standard, null value percentages. But the idea is I can add my own, maybe there's a particular code I'm looking for, maybe records older than or newer than a certain date are critical. If the nice thing is that I can, instead of manually running these SQL statements or checks on my data, I can incorporate them as rules. The 3D product, the design and profiling tool is entirely rules and metadata driven. I can get that knowledge out of my head. I can get it down into a rule that's embedded in the tool now. Or if a consultant comes in and does the work, they can get that information out of their head, get it into the tool, and it won't walk out the door when they walk out the door. Basically, any repeatable, mechanical, repetitive steps that are pattern-based, I can build into the tool. It's an incredibly flexible tool. And that allows you to first check the data coming in, and then once you've got it ingested in the bronze layer, it helps you move it to the silver layer by automating and allowing you to automate the rules of data quality. So whether you do the work or I do the work or someone else does the work, it's done in a very, very consistent way.
Super. Well, I think that's probably as good a place as any to draw a line under our conversation. So, Patrick, thanks so much for joining us once again. Your insights have been illuminating.
Good. Thank you. I appreciate it. These are fun to do.
Hey, thanks for checking out this week's episode of the Data Radio Show. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe button so you can get more updates from us on all of the things that are happening around the tech data world. And also don't forget you can sign up for things like our Data Pro newsletter, which comes direct to your inbox with the latest in innovations and information from around the country, the world, the industry, all of those places, direct to you. And there's also our school classroom if you want to come and join the conversation over there and talk to other data professionals, and it's all linked down in the description below, and you can find some of it in our bio as well. Look, until next time, have a fantastic week, live long and prosper, and may the force be with you.